Hello, my name is Lachlan, and I'm the host and creator of Mind Clickers. I am a sport and exercise science student with a passion for esports, athlete well-being, and performance. I got into esports quite a long time ago in high school, where I competed in a couple of online tournaments through Cybergamer, achieved high masters in StarCraft, and have been a motivated Counter-Strike player ever since. Mind Clickers is a show where I chat with professional esports athletes in an array of games from League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Valorant, and StarCraft. In the following episode, I talk with Toby Udysof Horne, who is a professional Oceania League of Legends player for the Dire Wolves. Toby has also moved to a coaching role with the Dire Cubs, undefeated with a record of 10 straight wins. Toby talks in detail about his experiences at the 2018 League of Legends World Championship and his ability to stay focused and motivated to achieve the team's common goal. We also touch on the future of esports and how sports science may play a major role, psychological variables such as imagery and stress, and have included a small segment at the end where we get insight into how Toby reacts in different jungle scenarios. Thank you for joining me in episode 1, and I hope you enjoy. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of Mind Clickers, where it's time to click both heads in 2020. I'm joined here today by Toby Udysof Horne. Thank you very much for coming on, mate.
No worries, Lockie. Happy to be here.
I guess we'll just start off with kind of like a brief overview of how you got into esports as a whole and kind of your journey from the beginning in esports and gaming.
So, firstly, the best way to describe it as getting into esports is I'm a professional League of Legends player to start with. I got into esports at the young age of about 12. I played Call of Duty at a semi-professional level, and then carrying on from Call of Duty, I played it on Xbox. When the new Xbox was coming out, I had to make the fatal decision of do I get a PC or do I get the new Xbox? And I went with a new PC. And then by that time, I had my new PC. My mates in high school were all League of Legends fanatics, and I had never played. And then the first time I played League of Legends, I was horrendous. And myself, I'm a very, very competitive person. I did not like losing, and I did not like being worse than my mates. So I quickly basically watched every single piece of content I could, grinded my way up. And yeah, that's the way I started and got into the esports grind of League of Legends and slowly worked the way up.
Yeah, for sure. I know that my friends and I, we actually started on Cybergamer. We started off playing some 3v3s. We did a couple of 5s, but we didn't actually go push those boundaries. We pushed more into like the COD 4 Pro Mod domain, which is really what we enjoyed, and that kind of FPS kind of scene. And a couple of other friends took that kind of league route. So coming from that background of COD initially, do you think that kind of helped you to transition and understand what was expected of you from that competitive viewpoint?
Honestly, no. I think like the lessons I learned from playing Call of Duty was honestly just it wasn't even lessons, it was just life skills. It was basic things, hanging out with mates, talking to people and working with other players. But it was really like just solidifying my drive to be better than everyone, I guess. It was more so me being able to show my colors as a completely competitive player from like the age of 12 to now I'm 21 and I've even competed professionally this year. So it's like it didn't affect it too much, but I think just me keeping engaged and saying on my toes in any single game that I've gone into is that's pretty much what I'd take from that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So can you provide us with a little bit of an insight into your role with the Dire Wolves and Cubs and, kind of what you get up to from a player perspective and from an overall perspective as well?
So recently I've headed over into a content management role and supporting the team with, I guess, coaching as well. So I've gone into coaching the Dire Cubs. I did a little bit of coaching with the Dire Wolves main squad. And I've also played some games as well for the Dire Cubs, just giving our roster some stability. We have a lot of fresh faces, and me being a pretty long-term competitive player, just being able to come there, be the voice of reason, help the young fellas learn, and then being a coach for them as well when I'm not playing is my role at the moment. Well, now the Die Cubs are done. Obviously, that's not my role at the moment. Now it's just making content, helping with the social media posts, and also doing my own stream, producing content that way. We have things like a Minecraft server and our stream team and a plethora of content engagement pieces.
Yeah, I really love that. Being the voice of reason and, providing that kind of coaching outlet from a past experience perspective, essentially. Now, when you look to the pandemic, COVID-19 and the effect that's had on traditional sports, a lot of the games have been halted. They've been, it's kind of been a really messy kind of situation for those guys. However, when you turn on the flip side and look at esports, a lot of tournaments are still going, a lot of, because it's mainly all run online. So do you think that, COVID-19, unfortunately, has had an impact on esports in a positive manner just because there's been a lot more increase in viewership and, a lot more games being played?
I think from a long-term growth perspective, it is beneficial because it brings more abstract thinking, I guess, to the world. So people who were, cemented within traditional sports that just had no interest of esports eventually had to come out and just have a look, whether they like it or not. It doesn't really matter to me. The fact that they're just aware and engaging in the space is the most important thing. You've seen recently with it's like F1 sim racing and stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
any boomer I ever speak to is like they just talk about like, oh yeah, F1, that's esports. Like obviously like that's like the tip of the iceberg, and that's the connection between regular sports and esports at the moment. It's primarily like F1 sim racing is what I see. But obviously we know, and a lot of esports fans know, that there is so much deeper, whether the League of Legends, Call of Duty, whatever the game is, right? It's a lot deeper than just F1 racing. But yeah, the COVID for that is absolutely huge just to get eyes on esports.
Oh, for sure. I definitely agree there, especially since that, when you look at esports as a whole, there's this high influx of games coming into the scene that are trying to make it competitive, especially when we look at this thing, the BR boom, there's just a high influx of battle royales. There's Cuisine Royale, Spade Royale. What is there? Car Royale. There's just so many different Royale games trying to get in and make it into the competitive scene. But on top of the ladder, there's those titans, PUBG, that's going to be that overwhelming ruling one. Sure, these lower ones might get a little bit of attention, might get a little bit of Steam charts for a couple of weeks, but in the long run, the longevity, it's questionable for a couple of them. But it's not a bad thing to have that influx of games because it draws more people into them, essentially. Now, when we look at esports as a whole and towards the future, obviously the grand prize, outside of esports and looking into more traditional sports is the Olympics. So how do you see esports as a whole, maybe entering the Olympics? Maybe it just be specifically for League or, an FPS game. How do you think that they can try and make that transition?
Yeah, there was conversations this year because it was Japan. So Japan
Mm-hmm.
was considering having, I believe, League of Legends. There were people like petitioning for it and things like that, and I saw like plenty of articles. Do I think it has a place in the Olympics? I don't know. It kind of depends on what the Olympics really wants to define, their space as. Like, do we have Olympic chess? If we don't have Olympic chess, I don't really see a need for Olympic League of Legends. Like, yeah, cool. Like, if they want to do it, sure, but I'm pretty sure the Olympics can be its own thing, and we can have our own gaming Olympics or whatever you want to call it. Like, the Olympics is, again, it's a huge process. It's a slow process, and it
Mm-hmm.
moves at a different pace to the esports world. And there are plenty of ways that they're compatible, but also just from my perspective, like, esports doesn't need to go back to what's traditional because it's working so well. Esports doesn't need to collaborate, but it can collaborate. It just doesn't need to. I think if the Olympics are smart, they'll try grab it. I'm sure they already are trying to grab onto things, because I think they know that they will get more viewership and engagement that way. There may be some, I guess, roadblocks with people not wanting to change or people thinking it's too weird. But I think the smart people out there know that esports should be within the grasp of the Olympics. I think now it's up to esports people to really determine, is it even worth it for them, or do they just go to Twitch? Do they go to YouTube and put it out themselves?
Mhm.
Because yeah, I'm not too sure how impactful being in the Olympics will be. There's benefits for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got to agree with you there, especially just since that esports on itself, it's essentially in its own Titan category. It can easily withhold itself. It can easily, perform. It has the resources. It has the revenue to do so, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. I only see it essentially speeding up, especially with the introduction of more performance technologies. VR, eye tracking, all these kind of things is gonna kind of bring more people to the space once they realize, how serious this space is. Regards to performance measurement in the sense of being able to analyze, where the athlete is in that notion of time and how that athlete's performing at any given situation. There's a lot of those performance measurements in traditional sports. However, for the esports scene, I think it is a little bit far behind in the sense that we aren't actively tracking athletes. We might be able to track some athletes' heart rates and see them, during key factors of a game where they spike. However, looking more towards the sense of eye tracking, do you see eye tracking as something that esports as a whole might adopt in the sense of being able to analyze back where you were looking during different parts of a game, what you should do, where you should look, and how that can essentially impact performance?
I guess it really depends on what's this eye tracking doing for you in the moment. If it's helping you in the moment, well then that's performance enhancing, right? So I don't personally want to see that, but obviously
Mm-hmm.
as a post game supportive, resource and piece of information for you to be able to track data and analytics and make improvements and draw, whatever you need to do, whatever your piece of equipment is tracking and helping you improve on. Yeah, absolutely. Like the more the merrier for me, man. Like if you see traditional athletes, they are tracking every single thing that you can to get the maximum performance. And
Mm-hmm.
esports is on the way. Obviously, esports is new and there's so many different things to track. So it's about figuring out what that is. But yeah, when it comes to eye tracking and everything, I'm not going to be the one to figure out what they use the eye tracking for, but when someone figures it out and tells me here's something we can measure, here's something we can act on, yeah, absolutely. I want to see it and I want to use it myself.
Yeah, I definitely think the future is near for performance measurement, especially those big Titan teams who are really trying to squeeze out that little bit of extra performance from their players, because ultimately, just that more insight, that more understanding can make the difference between winning or losing. Now, in regards to your coaching performance with the Cubs,
Mhm.
so take us through what that looks like. Is that more about taking each individual through a one-on-one coaching, or is it about sitting down with the team, gathering around the screen, having a look at where we were in position, where we had a gold lead, what we should have done in X position, why we performed what we did, and what we're trying to look for in that performance?
It varies. So everything you
Mhm.
touched on, I do a bit of everything. Yeah, I do all of those things that you touched on. A lot of thing that I bring to the Cubs, I guess, as a senior player and someone who in my career has been very outspoken on every single team that I've played on. I bring personally a leadership role and I bring people into line. Obviously, a lot of these people, like I'm only just turned 21, so it feels weird to say it, but a lot of them are very young kids, like 17, 18, some
Mhm.
19. And I am basically like their big brother. I step in, I call them out. I am, give them a slap across the head over the internet, whatever it may be. That is my major role because it's a team game and working as a team is the ultimate thing. And when you have a bunch of highly talented, highly driven, highly skillful young people, there's a lot of egos, there's a lot of clashes,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of differing ideas. So my primary role is literally just being that voice of reason and the person who can take a step back and be like, "You're wrong, you're right. Here's the middle ground." Whatever it may be, I'm there to facilitate a lot of learning, culture, and conversation.
Yeah, I definitely see the importance of, stepping in and being big brother to them and, helping them to develop their skills and where they need to touch on, especially since, they're up and coming and they're developing essentially, their growth is exponential. And what's interesting is, you compare gamers to traditional sports, we can only stay in the gym for a couple of hours at a time. We can only run on the field or, do high sprint training for, an X amount of time. But in terms of gaming, it's really exponential. It's quite easy to sit down and lose yourself in a couple of hours, let alone at that high professional level where you guys are at, training for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. It's a lot more easy to get that practice in. And that's why we see that up-and-coming youth who are being more skillful because they have that more time to spend in that scene, essentially, which is really interesting. And I think as, we progress, we might even see just even younger and younger generations starting to, be at the same skill level as the current 20-year-olds. So I think there is exponential growth and it's something to look out for, definitely. Okay, so now I'll grab the spoon and mix the bowl of talk, and we're going to incorporate some kind of psychological stuff into the mix now. So, when you go to OPL or when you perform at the Worlds, they're big stages, and when you look at traditional sports, it's a 12v12, but in, esports and in league especially, it's a 5v5. So standing up on stage, you're a lot more isolated and you stand out a lot more in comparison to trying to, blend in a team sport. And that can be daunting, There's lights, there's people, there's noise, and you want to perform to your best, It's all about performing to the best that you can, and you don't want anything to kind of intrude on that performance and, raise that anxiety and, provide you with that stress. So do you have any kind of like mental warm-ups that you go through to try and make sure that your performance is key and that's what you're really focused on?
When it comes to me getting in the zone, I honestly, I think it was one of my things that I really, really was good at as a player. And I think it gave me an edge. I think part of it is like just genetics. I think a lot of it for me is practice. I think prolifically on most teams I played on, I practiced a lot and was always mentally engaged. And anytime a life distraction came my way, I really, really pushed it to the side just to be at my best. Okay. And at times I was almost called robotic by my teammates because just things just did not faze me. Things did really not affect me. And it wasn't because I couldn't be affected by them. It was because I saw something coming and I would not let it come into my life. I was pure performance. So when it comes to really getting in the zone, it was honestly turn off messaging, turn off communication, you have to practice your ass off and understand what you need to do and then how to facilitate yourself. And it's like I always tell people, and I always use this analogy, it was from my mentor, Horne. It's like, when you're on an airplane and it's like, put the mask on yourself before you put it on others. That's always what I tell people. It's literally like, put the oxygen mask on yourself and then you can start helping others. Except I never got into the stage where I could even help others. It's always in League of Legends, it's always evolving and everyone's working so hard. Just keep the oxygen mask on yourself and let everyone around you figure it out for themselves, because it's a team game and there's a lot of collaboration, and I supported a lot of people, of course, but really it's you have to keep yourself in the game, can maintain your mental edge, because if you ever crack, there's going to be someone biting at your heels ready to take your spot. So really staying in the zone in League of Legends is your life depends and revolves around staying in it every single second of the day. Like there's some free time, but that free time for me was dedicated to maintaining my ability to stay in the zone. I would do something for fun, for the purpose of being able to relax. So in future, I could be a better League of Legends player. Every single thing I did was to become a better League of Legends player. Every single moment of the day. Eating, sleeping, having fun. Anything was for League of Legends. And that is the only way I was able to maintain staying in the zone. And I think, yeah, that is the way.
Yeah, for sure, man. Props to you. Honestly, that's an inspiration, I think, to many gamers who are trying to reach that professional league and don't really quite understand what it takes to reach there. As you said, if you have a crack, there'll be someone riding at your heels ready to take your spot. And that's such a high insight into what it takes to be a professional League of Legends player, because there was always a chance to make a mistake. There's a chance to amend those mistakes, but there's also a chance to, whilst making those mistakes, lose that performance as well. So, in regards to that consistent playing and obviously that strict schedule, did you ever feel, kind of a burnout phase? Kind of, you were kind of sick of it, or was it always just go, go, go?
No, I never felt burnout. Burnout came honestly when I stopped that. So when
Mm,
so when I wasn't able to be robotic and when I wasn't, I allowed, I guess, I started focusing on other things like bettering my personal relationships or being able to talk to people. When it wasn't League of Legends, that's kind of when the fatigue started, because you only have so much mental energy, right? So when I was dedicating it to more than just League of Legends, that's when burnout came. I think if you are purely able to focus on League of Legends and like the team you're with allows you and enables you to do that, then I don't see burnout being a huge issue for anyone. Um, but I think the biggest place burnout come from in esports is, struggles in real life, girlfriend, whatever it may be, external factors that take away your time from League of Legends, putting stress on you is really what causes burnout. Obviously, there's some people that just aren't cut out for it, but I say the most
mhm.
part is things that aren't League of Legends taking away your mental energy from League of Legends is what happens. And yeah, for me, I never really struggled with that until I kind of started toying with the idea of retiring and doing, this social stuff that I'm doing now. Is, you know, I was an all or nothing kind of guy. And then as soon as my dedication started wavering, that's when I felt symptoms of burning out. But I never really burnt out because I just said, if I'm not in it, I leave, and I left before I burnt out. But I've seen other people's, crash and burn.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that if you do have that collaboration with the coach and that external input, from the teammates and from the lads, it's fuel to the jet essentially. It's fuel to the car. You're just going forward and then you're not really looking back thinking, okay, whatever. It's okay, we've done this game. Now we scream, get more practice in, time for the next one. There isn't really that opportunity to burn out, which I think is really important at that professional mindset because, performance and focus is key. I think in terms of burning out for myself personally, I think I burn out at that high level of in StarCraft specifically around that high masters, especially when I started to get ladder anxiety. So I started to really stress before the games, and that's what caused me to have that kind of burnout and just not want to deal with that semantic and cognitive anxiety, and that's what really led me to a big performance deficit. So in regards to getting ready before the games, do you have those type of small things, whether it be okay, my keyboard has to be set perfectly, my mouse has to be aligned perfectly, monitored correctly, or is it more about just okay, all the lads are around me, left, right, we're here together, let's flip the switch and let's win the game? Is it more of that performance mindset, or is it worrying about those small external kind of things?
Mm, I think it comes back to like practicing. So as long
Mm-hmm.
as I could get my environment as close as possible to my practice environment, screen monitor pretty similar distance away that I'm used to practicing with, chair arms at the right, level, keyboard mouse, I always use the same one. Everything's set up to go. The only thing that you really had to focus on, especially on like the world stage, is really blocking out that crowd. That's the one thing that it's just so different to your practice stage. And there's lights and everything, whatever it may be. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, for me, walking onto the stage, you look, you see, and then you see your setup, and then everything else doesn't matter. Um, yeah, as long as your setup's there and everything's up in order, it was very, very manageable for me to just be like, it's time to go, it's time to play.
Yeah, for sure. Was that type of mindset still the same from the first entry game in comparison to like a best of five? It's 2-2, it's the decider essentially. Did you still have that same mental kind of thought process, or was it a bit more serious? Okay, we really have to toggle on, we really have to make sure we're on our game? Or was it just kind of the whole way through, just making sure you have that same mindset continuously essentially?
Well, when it comes into those best of five situations, every single time I've gone into one, I always came in myself personally so prepared that I always thought of every single way we could lose and every single flaw that we had. So I came into every single best of five I've ever played thinking we were gonna get stomped, and I've never lost a best of five I've played because I think I just came in so prepared and so mentally aware of all the things that I needed to do that I guess that it just gave me that mental edge and gave me that mental preparation, because in a best of five, by the time you get to game four, game five, like everyone is mush. Their brains are like just decaying. It's everyone is making uncharacteristic mistakes. Some people are afraid. Some people are so far gone that they live with no fear. It kind of it just really depends on the player and how they play and everything. So is there, like, basically touching on the differences between your first game and then like a best of five or whatever it may be? It's a whole different ball game, and it's
Mhm.
really, really, again, preparation is key. And yeah, again, that's the only thing I can harper onto is hard work, preparation, and yeah, it's really different because fatigue is the major factor in a best of five.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I can only imagine the cognitive and ongoing mental fatigue that happens during those games, especially just because of how long they, obviously go for. You look at traditional sports where games go for, 90 minutes. And then you look at the esports scene, especially, League of Legends, games and sets, especially, a game could go up to 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And if you're playing 4 or 5 games, that's a long time. It's same thing in Counter-Strike. And whilst you're playing those games, you have to be actively, understanding and processing, well, what's going on? What do we need to do? How do we need to react? Are we at an advantage lead? Are we, we losing? And actively making decisions on the fly for such an extended duration of time. So as you said, everyone's brains turn to mush. And I guess you can only kind of get better from that from performing under those situations, which is where that practice kind of comes in, being able to practice for a long amount of time. So in terms of, touching on what you said earlier, walking on stage and having that preparation, did you ever visualize walking on stage, reacting to the crowds, they're loud, and having that impact on your performance? Or was it just a sense of, okay, the crowd's there, I know what I need to do, they're going to be there, they're going to be there for everyone, and I need to react how I need to react?
I think personally, I didn't put any thought into it because if my brains, for me, I think because I've never experienced it before, I think trying to imagine what it was like was like too unrealistic. Like there's just too many
Hmm.
things that I just don't understand about the experience, that me even trying to visualize it or experience it before it happens was like a waste of my energy. So for me, I've only ever been on a huge stage once in front of people. Like I've been on stages, but there's no crowd. But I was at Worlds in 2018. There was a big ass crowd, and I yeah, I just didn't think about it. I walked in, I accepted the experience, and then sat down and I didn't think about it. Or I tried not to think about it. There was glimpses and moments in the game where you just hear a ton of people cheering, and
Yeah.
there's the world around you is shaking, and you get taken out for 2 seconds, and that happens to everyone, especially people who are new. Like I don't think, however long you've been playing, maybe you're like a completely seasoned veteran of 10 years plus or something, maybe you can control that. But no one I played with has been playing for over more than like 4 years at the time. So no one was able to really keep themselves completely in control, during that experience. So yeah, get in, get down, and keep your head in the game for as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. I think, those type of things where it's essentially out of my reach, it's out of your reach in regards to, well, everyone has to go through it, like you said. And that's just something that I can't control. Just one of those extra external variables that are there. Everyone knows that they're there. But ultimately, we're here to perform, we're here to play our best. So it's just about worrying about how I'm going to perform and keeping my mind in the game. Now, in regards to essentially imagining and having that visualization of victory or defeat, did you ever go in knowing that, okay, we've easily got the game, or if it was a bit of a stronger team, we might, be up for a loss here? Because I know in sports psychology, we always tend to visualize that defeat, but it's not one of those things that we should do.
Um, when it came into the world specifically, I was going into it before the match. I knew that we were at just it was all about acceptance, right? It was like
Mhm.
I understood that statistically speaking, we were at a disadvantage, especially coming up against the Chinese teams who are just far above and beyond like the level of Australian play at the moment. Um, Going into the like versing other teams, I had no real, I guess, thoughts, and it was more just like I just play my game. The only team was like China was like, wow, this is gonna be a tough game. The going into the mat, like it's kind of something you accept and then move on. It's something you don't ever really think about.
Mhm.
Like once you're in the game, it really doesn't matter. I don't like you said you're talking about the visualizing the win and things like that. Like you, the amount of energy that you need to put into a League of Legends game specifically is like thinking about the win. Like if you think about the
Mhm.
win, you've like already lost, right? There's
Yeah.
so many things that you need to think about that begin at minute one that carry on to like whatever minute 25 or 30, however long the game goes, that just doesn't entail winning at all. And it's all about dragging and clawing your way into a victory position. And if you're already visualizing a win, well, you're not going to be dragging and clawing your way to where you need to be to win, right? So you need to just remain in that mentality of like, we're at an even footing and I got to work my ass off and focus for the next 25 minutes on here's, step one, step two, all this happened.
Mhm.
How do I adapt? Step four, step five, step six, whatever it may be. It is living in the moment and every single thing that happens in the game and analyzing it on the fly because, yeah, you cannot visualize and you cannot expect anything to go any single way in a League of Legends game because it is just so sporadic sometimes that if you have a visualization of exactly what's going to happen, then something is going to change and it's going to throw you off. Obviously you can visualize little tiny things that you know are going to happen, like specific matchups and specific engagements and whatever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, think about it, prepare for it, practice it, but visualizing the entire game and visualizing a win, nah, no point.
Yeah, I do agree with the fact that, we do sometimes overthink about things, and that can obviously lead to a detrimental impact on performance. And there are a couple of models that help to, predict, well, the more we think about things, the more we start to stress about them and overreact and start to perform not how we originally wanted to. Now, in regards to sports psychology, there are those kind of models essentially that are individualized specific, such as the drive theory or the inverted U hypothesis, that kind of characterize that best performances take place in high pressure situations, or that in regards to the inverted U hypothesis, that there's a relationship between arousal and performance that's curvilinear. So it's about finding that sweet spot of being aroused and having that optimal performance. Now, just briefly touching on communication and the importance of communication in an esports scene. When we look to traditional games, we might pass the ball, we might reset play, and have a small little bit of a bant about what it is we're going to do next. But in terms of league specifically, comms have to be active almost every second of the game because as soon as we spot something, someone else needs to know it. So, how do you think the importance of comms plays into that role?
Yeah, like comms and direct straight comms is like my lifeblood. And that's like the thing that I live by, especially this year in coaching the Dire Cubs. They are young and inexperienced. So a big thing that they have flaws with is, besides their individual things that they need to improve on, is their communication. And we have some people, it depends on the person. Some people don't like to talk at all. Some people like to get told what to do. And then some people like to tell people what to do. And then there's also a combination of people that just like to say things for the sake of saying things. And all of these different types of communications have their flaws, pros, cons, things they need to improve on. And it's, for me, it's like simple, just sweet and simple, man. Like, just tell me what you want, tell me what you need, tell me what's happening and cut the rest of the crap. Like, whatever it may be, it's like, this guy's doing this. It doesn't matter. Like, just if he's doing something and it's impacting someone, tell me. Just give me the comms, give me the info, and cut it to me straight. And like, I will. Yeah, that is just a big thing that is super, super important, because if someone
Hmm.
is telling you a bunch of information and you need to decode it while
Yeah.
playing a League of Legends game and focusing on
Hmm.
CSing, fighting, kiting, and if someone's giving you a paragraph essay, like, I'm not going to take in shit. So tell me in 3 words what's happening, and let's go from there.
Yeah, I think myself, I am very guilty of just having absolutely obtrusive comms, just kind of reporting what I don't need to report, saying what I don't need to say. But I guess that's kind of just like that annoying side of myself that is kind of, why am I saying this? But at the same time, it's all just a part of the bands and we're all just playing alongside each other overall. Now, I think one of the big problems a lot of gamers have is this whole idea of getting enough sleep. Now, sleep is obviously has been shown to be such a high importance for our cognitive ability and for our ability to perform. And being, as we touched on before, having that mental fatigue during games, we want to be alert and we want to be ready and we want to be awake, essentially. We don't want to have those pre-lingering effects of, not getting enough sleep. So in your opinion, how, important is sleep, especially performing at that super high level?
Okay. So sleep is a very interesting one. I think, from me personally, I'm a science guy, and I think, just from everything I've ever read, everything I've ever absorbed, sleep is the most important thing for any human being to function.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's variations and differentiations in people's ability to, recover and how much sleep they need. But so, from my experience with people needing sleep and things, it's everything that I've absorbed over the years through science articles, videos, whatever it may be. Sleep is the lifeblood of any athlete, any person who wants to be high performing. Sleep is so essential for that, and I've seen people perform well with bad sleep though, and I've seen people perform horrendously with good sleep. So there are a lot of factors that, go into being a performance athlete, besides sleep. But I think if you're getting good sleep and you're able to practice and do everything else that goes in between, like, yeah, like, sleep is going to give you some kind of edge, in my opinion. But some people got to sacrifice sleep for practice if they don't use their time efficiently.
Yeah, I do think that sleep, and I agree with you, it's one of those important things that a lot of people neglect. And you don't want to neglect in that sense that you want to make sure that you're having enough sleep so those, that cognitive drain doesn't come back and affect your overall performance on the day, essentially. I do think that a lot of people, don't get enough sleep. And whether or not that is individual specific, it's something that, they obviously have to deal with. But as a whole, I do really stress the importance of sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that a lot of teams tend to go on these kind of boot camps to essentially maybe fast track some of their skills that they want to work on. Is that, what the kind of things you guys do at the Direwolves, essentially try and go on these team camps to, build that, team communication and enhance that team dynamic and that culture within the team?
Yeah, when it comes to boot camping, it really depends on where you're boot camping. So, um, there's the ideal for a League of Legends player is probably boot camping in Korea. So you
Hmm.
boot camp, you go to Korea, you go as a team, you stay in some whatever place and live together, and then you usually it's you live in one place and then you travel to a facility or something that contains, computers that you guys can all practice in, and then there's all the experiences in between that go with being in a new country. So like there's obviously the performance side of things where it's we are in Korea, we are playing against the top competition, we are able to play against Korean teams with good connectivity and really really perform at our best, and get exploited for our weaknesses and learn from our weaknesses and bring it back
Hmm.
to our domestic region, from a gameplay perspective. But there's also the added benefits of we are gamers essentially. The stereotypes of people who stay inside a lot, don't get enough sun. In some ways, it is quite true where these people are dedicating like 95% of their life to sitting at a computer or sleeping. People aren't hanging out and doing the normal things that build friendships and connections. They're not going outside. They're not playing sport. They're not doing all these other things that
Mm-hmm.
people build friendships, relationships, connections over, and they don't genuinely spend a lot of time getting to know each other. So when it comes to going and living in Korea for a bit on a boot camp, you guys have to figure out how to eat and order a meal at a Korean restaurant together. You guys have to, someone says they see something cool on a map or something and they go check it out when they have 30 minutes of free time. Like, obviously, if you're in Australia, you're not going to be like, hey guys, let's walk down to the park. It's really cool. Like League of Legends people just don't really do that. Like, but obviously, if you're in Korea, you're in any country, like we went to London at the start of this year, like, oh, let's go check out this amazing site or this thing that I've only ever seen online. Like, it's just a
Mm-hmm.
huge reason and, almost excuse to get the players communicating, doing things that has nothing to do with League of Legends. And you create like a lot of camaraderie, jokes, just connection between everyone that only you guys can relate to. No
Mm-hmm.
one can just step in and be like, "Hey guys, remember that time when you went to Korea?" Like, they don't care, they don't relate. It doesn't matter. Like, them five all built that connection together, and they're all able to relate. They're all able to understand, and they're all able to bond over one unique thing that is specific to just that group. And that's like the most important thing of a boot camp to me, is like the practice and then that exclusivity of the experience that they all get to share together and talk about and build connections over, just to be an overall better cohesive unit. And at times it just gives them things to step back and reflect on and have fun and talk about and really step out of the game. And as I mentioned like earlier before, it's like everything I would do was focused on getting better at League of Legends. Like, that's just like one of those things. It's like hanging out with the boys and chatting shit is really what you have to do sometimes to get the best out of your team. And that's just a really, really big experience of that you can accelerate that for anyone.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see the benefit of going on these little team like dynamic camps and building and enhancing that team culture and working on communication skills. Because at the end of the day, that's what you guys are doing. You're playing league and you're communicating essentially. So I do see the importance of, getting out and, kind of exploring those other options outside the game, whether that be, as you said, going to a park or whatever, things that we wouldn't normally do. And I can see how that can have a direct benefit on, helping, create those friendships and form those relationships, which in return allow for you to play, stronger together in game. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to run through a couple of game specific scenarios in this little last segment. I really want to play around with this idea for future talks as well, just to get more of an in depth analysis and insight into some of the scenarios that you may encounter in game. And for these scenarios, just imagine that it is, a best of five. You've got some of that cognitive fatigue, and it's currently 2-2, and it's the decider match. So let's start off with what goes through your mind, essentially, when you see the enemy jungler.
I'm in the top jungle and I see the other jungle. Where do I see him? Like, with me at the top jungle?
Just say like around bushes, top bushes. Say you're going for a gank, but the enemy jungler came. Like, how do you react to that?
Okay. Well, so if I'm ganking top, usually it means the enemy top laner is pushed in generically. So in that
Mm-hmm.
scenario, depending on your jungle matchup, if I'm the stronger jungler, obviously I just walk into river and I brute force, I guess, brute force my way into the river and either force him to back off or force him to fight me. And then I have
Mm-hmm.
to, I guess, decide, does where are the rest of my teammates on the map? Is my top laner able to move and support me? Is my mid laner able to move and support me? Does my support have roam from all the way at bot? Take in all of those factors and then basically decide, do I continue pushing in and fighting or do I back off? Yeah, that's the thought process, and then obviously there's so many scenarios that can come from that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing about, as you said, leagues just so dynamic. You're not going to be versing the same champion each game. There's different play styles, and there's so many things to try and micromanage in a game that lasts up to 40 minutes. So let's take it to a scenario where imagine you just went to shop, you just bought some items, you're going to go take your red in bottom jungle. However, you see the enemy jungle trying to take it as well. Do you try and contest that fight, or do you say, okay, they're counter jungling me, I'm going to counter jungle them, try and establish that equilibrium in terms of resources and try and get that lead in their jungle?
So again, it as a jungle, it always like you are so lane dependent. So the first thing
Mm-hmm.
is you check where's my laners. So if you're getting invaded on your red, where's my bot? Does my bot have push? Is my bot pushed under tower? Is the enemy support
Mm-hmm.
already on his way? So, for example, if the enemy support's already on his way, you just dip. There's no point. You're 1v2, right? You run and you have to identify are there any camps on the other side of the map? You just run straight to the other side of the map and you just try and stabilize that way. Um, a lot of the meta specifically right now is like tempo junglers and farm junglers. So if you're getting invaded, you're running to the other side of the map and you're trying to scavenge as much as possible. If the enemy team doesn't have push, then you're calling your laners to fight. If you have a good matchup, say you're like a popular matchup right now is like Hecarim Lily or something, right? If you're both
Mm-hmm.
level 6, that's a pretty even fight. And if you have your laners able to move, I'm taking that fight 100% of the time. But
Yeah.
if you don't have your laners able to move, then you're dipping. No need to fight.
Yeah, right. And just touching briefly on that, what do you think are the most important key milestone levels for a jungler? Like I know some junglers like to go for like level 2 ganks, level 2 pushes, try and burn a flash.
Huh.
Or is it more of, waiting to establish that level 6? What's the thought process there?
Well, it, specifically, domestically, it really depends on where you are, right? So in China, they're really, really big, and in Europe, they're really, really big on getting early leads and
Mm-hmm.
getting level 2 dominance and strength, level 2, level 3, level 4. And as we've seen, the top two regions at the moment are, well, it was a China, Europe in the finals of Worlds last year. So just based off that, I think early game pressure is the optimal way to play League of Legends. But in that being said, because of the skill difference of our region, Oceania, if you give someone an early lead, they are not going to be able to do enough with it to
Right.
establish
Okay.
control of the game. So if we're talking domestically, farming, getting control, getting your levels, getting your XP is the way to play jungle. If you have insane teammates who are able to use the leads you give them to create more leads and snowball the game early, like Korean players can, European players can, then yeah, absolutely go for that early aggression. But if you're just an oceanic player like myself, like as much as it pains me to say, you just got to farm and you got to play for yourself.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I never really actually, have thought in depth about the differences between domestic versus international competition and the different play styles. Because obviously, different teams have, whether they're more aggressive or defensive or, have certain strats that they like to use. So in regards to items, obviously there's tons of widespread items to use. What's the mindset when buying an item? Do you buy to counter pick? Do you buy to, play alongside the team? Do you like to take some selfish items at the start to try and get that power creep lead? Do you, worry about what the enemy jungle is building and try and counter pick him? What's the thought process on that?
So it really depends on the meta at the moment. Right now, we're in a jungle carry stage, I guess, where lots of Hekarims, lots of Lilias, Evelyn's popping up. All of these champions do damage essentially, and they're able to create high impact in team fights. So right now, it's all about being selfish, getting gold, and getting the really big power spikes through your items. But it does change on metas. Sometimes we've got Ivern, sometimes we've got Sejuani's, the supportive Ivern star where you're buying support items and you're playing for the rest of your team. And then you've also got the Sejuani's where you're building pure tank stats and it's essentially supporting your team again in that way where you're just tanking up, you're being a frontline, you're allowing other people to carry just in a different way to that, Ivan support style. So yeah, it's meta dependent and there's a lot of variation. There's also ways where you're buying, I guess, defensive items like a Randuin's or something in a weird situation normally, but in a specific game, you could be against a bunch of characters that are countered by Randuin's through, the crit changes and things like that it applies. So yeah, it's very volatile and dependent, but the meta right now is bruiser carries.
Yeah, right. And what happens in the situation where one of your main champs is nerfed? Is that just essentially, having that character pool in the back to try and select and try and match the meta with? Is it, being able to know that, what champions are going to be suitable for the meta and then trying to like foresee, well, this champion were really good in these matchups and trying to learn those different kind of matchups essentially?
Yeah, if your character gets nerfed and gutted out of existence and you have nothing to move to, you might need to reconsider if you can even be a professional player, because a professional player, at the end of the day, you got to be ready to adapt or die.
Yep.
And if you can only play two characters as a professional player, either the meta has been stale for a long time or you are not a well-versed, player, I guess. So if something changes, you change and you learn something new. And if you can't learn something new, I guarantee you some other kid will be able to do it and take your spot. So yeah, simple answer is adapt or die.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely see how adaptability is just so important, especially in a changing meta all the time. And lastly, just in regards to practice, obviously when we see these FPS games such as CS or Valorant have these external aim trainers that allow you to, practice the same things again and again and again, which then you can take into the actual tournament and games, like, practicing retakes, for example. But in regards to League, there's not really that kind of game mode that allows you to do that. I mean, we have ARAMs and we have testing dummies that allow us to essentially get those kind of, optimal item rotations in and optimal ability rotations in. But what's the go with practice? Is it just essentially more games equals better skill, or is it about breaking down more of the information?
I guess I think the biggest thing is like identifying what you need to work on, really, and then you can go from there. So for example, as a jungler, the primary thing you're working on all the time is your jungle pathing, and you don't need to practice jungle pathing to learn jungle pathing. You can watch VODs, you can watch people from around the world and see what they do, and you can just literally watch and learn. You don't have to play to learn stuff like that. Then there's other things like skill shots where at the end of the day you should just be getting into a game and practicing your skill shots, and you should be really hard on yourself for every single skill shot you miss, and really analyze people's movement, dodges, your click placement, things like that, really getting into the nitty gritty and finer details of how to improve on those specifics. Yeah, that's just a few ways you can improve, but the big picture is identify what you need to work on and then really go hard and hammer one thing home at a time.
Yeah, I think that kind of wraps up everything really nicely. Sometimes, and it's not about purely focusing, but there's other external things that we can do that can also help performance. Whether that be, as you said, watching some games over and just learning through that. I think there is a big importance, of being able to watch other people and, critically analyze their technique as well. So in terms of everyone listening, where can we find you on socials?
You can find me basically at Udysof, at UDYSOF, on pretty much every platform, except I think Instagram is Udysof_OCE. Everything else is, at Udysof. So yeah, that's where you find me. Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube is the main three. So go check those out. I would, appreciate that. And thank you very much for having me, Lockie.
Yeah, no worries, Toby. Thank you, once again for coming on and, just taking that time out of your day. I'm sure everyone listening has learned maybe one or two things that they can take away, and kind of even use as just life principles in itself. Using those kind of terms such as, if you have a crack, there'll be someone biting at your heels ready to take your spot. So just make sure to be focused and ready to go, essentially. So once again, thank you everyone for listening. If you managed to make it this far, it was quite a lengthy episode 1, just under an hour. For future episodes, I don't think the next couple of 2 aren't quite as long, so around the 20-minute mark. So there'll be like a nice quick listen and an insight into a few other special games. But make sure to stay tuned on Mind Clickers on Instagram and on Mind Clickers on Facebook for information about what's going to be coming up soon. Thank you everyone, and enjoy where you are in the world, day or night. I'll see you in the next one.